Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom podcast. I've got Michel Bauwens here, and he is the founder of the P2P Foundation, and we're going to talk a lot about peer-to-peer, what that means. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stewart. Happy to talk to you.
Yeah. So peer-to-peer, it's so interesting that because the name peer-to-peer is really interesting because ever since Napster came out, and Napster really sort of pissed off a lot of record labels and people who are in the old school traditional copyright type of thing. But it started a revolution that won't stop, although it does seem very much like it's losing right now in terms of the surveillance state and all these sorts of things. What do you like? Yeah. What do you think peer-to-peer means, and what do you think it means for our future?
Right. So let me just react to losing and winning. It's like print. So print was a continuous fight between the people who want to spread information and those who want to limit it. There's no winner or loser. It's just mutual adaptation to a new capacity. So I just want to say that up front because
Sure.
that's basically what's happening is, as the powers that want to control try to control, which is what they do, and other people are still continuously trying to find other ways to do the same. And, if you look at, for example, the US, cultural war, the underdogs in the beginning were clearly the Republicans, because they're not in university, they're not in academia, they're not in the, most of the media, and they use all these kind of underground YouTube channels, which are now like 10 times bigger than the mainstream, right? And I'm not saying one is right, one is wrong. I'm just saying that the underdog, which is now actually no longer the underdog, actually use these mechanisms to win. So it's a complex thing. So let's go back to your original question about peer-to-peer, right? So in the narrow sense, we're talking about this thing about computers, right? Where there was a particular design to, create distributed systems where every piece of any computer could talk with any piece of any other computer without asking for any intermediate permission. So that was the ideal, and it was implemented, for example, in the email protocol and TCP/IP of the internet. But so what the P2P Foundation did from the very beginning was extrapolate from that a social relationship, right? Saying, well, if computers can do that, people can do it. And it actually doesn't matter if it's literal, because, for example, we can take Facebook, which I agree is very bad in many ways. And I quit because of the huge censorship on Facebook. I just couldn't stand it anymore. But despite everything, they still allow, like, I don't know how many billion people now to communicate with each other, and they can't control everything that these people do.
Interesting.
They have actually enabled, in some way, a new type of social relationship. And I would summarize that social relationship as translocal association.
Oh, cool.
So right, peer-to-peer has always existed in small groups where I can go to my neighbor or my uncle in a clan or a tribe or a village, but it couldn't scale. Now I can talk to you. I can talk to a lot of people in the world using that mechanism, and we can associate. And they can control it to some degree, but they cannot fully control this new capacity. And so that's I would, to use a difficult word, I would call this an anthropological revolution, just as the invention of writing, the invention of print, the invention of radio and television. This is really something that has changed already, in my view, everything, right? And that's basically what the P2P Foundation has been doing. So I had this intuition very early, between 19 and 1930. I wasn't early because, a lot of scientists were already working on the internet by then. But in terms of, like, in Belgium, I was the person saying to everybody, this is going to change our society. This is going to change business. And so that was pretty early, nevertheless, because 93 for me is like the key date, right? October 93, invention of the browser and invention of the web. Like with that, we democratized something that was confined to like a scientific class in academia and military research, and suddenly it started. And then what you can say is that there's like layers upon layers. So the first layer is, oh wow, now business is interested because there's so many people there, so business want to get on top of it, right? And once you have business on top of it, then government wants to say, oh, you need to control this, right? And so if
Yeah.
you look at the original peer-to-peer, it's still there, but it's overlaid by various attempts by the powers that be to control and manage it. And then on the other hand, you have also permanent reactions to go beyond that control. And so, for example, in Web3 today, Web3 is a project to recreate Web1 as it was supposed to be, but with defense mechanism in place so that they can't do it again, right? So that's, and I'm not a technical person, but I work with a lot of people in the Web3 community. And, that's what they're doing. They're inventing new forms of encryption, of privacy, of, anti-surveillance. I mean, they're busy bees doing all kinds of stuff. And in general, I would say today, the difference with like 15 years ago is that people have lost their faith in this global public sphere.
Yeah.
It was represented by Facebook and Twitter in the beginning. And now it's like either if you want to be optimistic, you call it the cozy web. If you want to be pessimistic, you call it the dark forest theory, where, this is from this famous show, The Three Body Problem, where, the rule is if you let anybody alien know that you exist, they will destroy you. So that was a big mistake from Earth to actually. And so now a lot of people are thinking, I want to use the internet, but I don't want people to know what I'm doing on it.
Yeah.
So that's where we are now. And it's sad. I find it sad because I'm from the generation where we'd like to share.
Early 90s. And I'm not from that generation, but I grew up with the people who created that in Silicon Valley, surrounded by them with that ethos. And so I still have that ethos. And but very interesting to counterposition the cozy web versus the dark forest theory. And it's funny because there was a point probably in 2017 or 2018 where I was like, should I be putting this much stuff on the internet? And then I was like, well, too late. And then 2020 happened, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is interesting territory. So now it's far too late for me to change anything to go to
way too late. I was canceled in 2018. I lost everything. I lost three fundings. I was debanked, PayPal,
Whoa.
So I got the whole thing, man. So for me, it's like, fuck it.
Whoa. In 2018.
Probably using.
No, it's fine. Can you go more into what happened in 2018?
Well, I have been a lifelong lefty until that time. Yeah. Basically, I come from a labor family, working class parents. My father was in the union. I was a young activist on the left, and kind of not always with the same intensity, but basically I believe that the world wasn't fair enough, especially for people who have to work for a living. And so that was kind of my basic attitude. And so it's just, I thought that's my identity, right? And then I shared a video on Jordan Peterson, but actually a critical video. It wasn't even saying like he's great.
Yeah.
I was actually saying literally, why do young people, when they're in trouble, they go to people like Jordan Peterson and not the left? I was saying it's because we're too serious.
Not to who? Not to who?
To the left, right? And my answer was, and I thought we would have a discussion, which was like, what did I say? Yeah, because we're too political, right? So when you have really ontological, metaphysical, existential issues, like it's not, you have to be deeper than politics. And that was all I said. And then the reaction was, why are you sharing this fascist?
Yeah.
And I come from tradition from, believe it or not, there was one day there was another left that was actually very factual, research based. I had teachers, like in my university, like great Marxist scholars,
Mm,
like these people were researching, looking at statistics. They never had, they never felt the need to like cheat with the stats or anything. It's just like they were critiquing,
mm,
reading the people and then critiquing the people they were reading. They weren't like doing anything extra on that. Of course they had their point of view. But anyway, so here's what I replied. Well, I don't think he's a fascist because he's been teaching 10 years against fascism. I think he's a liberal conservative.
Interesting.
And then all hell broke loose. And then, oh, you can't speak about this because you're white. You can't speak about this because you're male.
Yeah. The critical theory.
I couldn't believe it. I said, hey guys, I thought we were egalitarian. I thought it was for everybody. And I wouldn't say it was a majority. It was like I had 60,000 people in 6 forums, and maybe we're talking about 60 people, but everybody was afraid, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Nobody defended me, and they wanted to take over my wiki. They wanted to censor the Facebook, forums, and like I said, no, this is pluralistic. Like whether you agree with me or not, and there's peer-to-peer is not left or right. I was on the left, but I didn't expect everybody else to be on the left. We have libertarians, we have crypto libertarians, we have even conservative people that like this form of communication. There's like nothing specific, and so this is a forum where everybody can talk. And no, because everybody who wasn't like them
interesting
was defined. And anyway, and then of course they went to look at all my tweets, and not that they found much, and it had the opposite effect on me. I said, wow, if this is the left, what am I doing here? This is not,
man.
And so and in 2018 it was very traumatic because it was my identity.
How did they debank you? How did they debank you in 2018?
So okay, this is a silly story. But one day the Belgian tax office sends me like a 30,000 euro tax claim.
Whoa.
And I didn't even make that much, because I was like an activist, right? So I was barely making that much. And if I was making more, I was like using it, for our project. Anyway, so so I couldn't pay this, and I didn't want to pay this. I took a lawyer in Belgium, and he found out it was a OCR. Now, but I have to tell you, I talked to hackers, and he said 20 years ago, yes, but in 2000, I don't know exactly when it was, in 2019. Right? In 2019, OCR that just adds a 0 to your tax. Like, so they didn't believe that this was a real thing. So, and I tend to believe that too, because there's so many things happen at the same time that I say, this cannot be a coincidence. This is like, there's somebody like, actually somebody there, like trying to harm my work. And so I believe this was not an accident. Then suddenly I couldn't get in my PayPal. And they closed my bank account. I mean, it was, and I got blacklisted. Anyway, all the stuff. So I used to speak in big things like Ideas Festival and Republica in Berlin. I was of all these big things, and no more. I don't get invited to those things. It's. It's everybody believes that, but it's enough that one person says, "Oh, didn't I hear that this guy?" And then everybody goes like this. Oh no, we can't risk that, right? That's how it happens. It's not like a
identity. But it gets, well, it's a decentralized conspiracy, right? It's not centralized. There's and this is the hardest thing for me to understand about 2020. I come from a neoliberal background. It's really interesting. My grandfather was a journalist, and I've read various books. He was a journalist in Washington, D.C., covering the rise of, ever since World War II, he was involved with the OSS and he was involved with the CIA, but not as a direct, he was an intelligence asset for the CIA. So he wasn't directly involved with the CIA, but there was a lot of relationship between the two. And so from the left, from this, but I actually, they called themselves conservatives. My grandfather and my great granduncle
Yeah.
My great granduncle, I can kind of see the conservative part. He was a Vietnam hawk.
Yeah.
But from reading them for 10 years, I would place them on the old left. And then the new left came in 1970s, 1960s,
Right.
1970s. New left came in. And that's
Yeah.
where a lot of the strains of the decentralization that you're talking about, where it was a identity based. Because when you did those things, when you started to comment,
Yeah,
to
it
question the
was the
identity,
movement
that's
of the Labour Party, but it's of course it started when I grew up in '68. I was 10 years old,
yeah.
right? So
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
it shifted. It already shifted to identity, but it
yeah.
still had the old thing there, right? And so I could. There were a lot of people that were like collectivistic,
Mm,
redistribution, and and next door there would be people who want women's rights and black
mm,
rights.
mm.
And I would say that, you know, so I studied civilizational history after 2020. Very systematically. I'm reading all the macro historians, and the
Cool.
cyclicality of things, right? So
Yeah.
something can start genuine, like in the 60 in 68. You have to remember, like you had to say sir to your father. You
Yeah.
didn't speak
Yeah.
in class. And so suddenly you have this wave of educated children, the first mass wave of education in history, right? Where like 100% of the kids go to school suddenly, right?
Yeah.
And so that like they don't want that. They don't want that. And because there's so many of them, they can't be stopped. That's basically, I think, the idea, right? And so in the beginning you have like legitimate demands, I think. I mean, they can be discussed, but they're legitimate. And then as you grow older, the long march to the institutions, as it's
Mm,
sometimes called, right? So,
mm,
and then suddenly,
mm.
well, okay, now all these culturally progressive boomers, they're managing everything. And you know what? When something doesn't work, they think it's because we don't go far enough, right? So because if you're ideological, you're always
Yeah.
thinking the reason it doesn't work because we didn't do enough of it. And so
Yeah.
that's how you get into extremes over time. And it happened
Yeah.
to the right wing within the Victorian times as well. You get to the point
Yeah.
where
Let's talk
you
about
know
that. Victorians.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
it's a cyclical, and then the new cycle reacts to the old cycle, right? So now to be
Yeah.
subversive today is to be right wing, because
Yeah.
everybody in
Yeah.
power is culturally left wing. They're not left wing in the sense that I was left wing, but they're left wing culturally, right? And so the reaction to it is now, like, if you're a young man, mostly young man, but not just,
Yeah. Yeah.
is
Interesting.
you feel that if you want to be against that, well, okay, oh, I'm right wing because all these people say they're left wing, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think we are at the end of this big wave, right? We are at the end of this
Yeah.
wave that started in '68, basically. Or so in the fourth turning, they would, the fourth turning idea,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a bit different. So you have the first wave. The first turning is 45, when people recreate a new society, new institutions after the war, and everybody is very motivated. But then their children, 20 years, 15 years after, in the 60s, they're not happy with it. And that's exactly where I was. I was 16, and my mother said, happiness is when the fridge is full. And
Mm.
I was outraged. I said, how can you say something like this, right? But for them who had been hungry in the war, it made
Mm.
sense.
Mm.
But for me, even though we were poor, but I had always had food and shelter, like I could not imagine anybody could be so shallow as to say that happiness is a full fridge, right? So we were revolting against the materialism. So that's the
Yeah.
second turning, right? Which is the spiritual awakening. Then the third turning is in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, where there's like a balance between the two. And then the fourth turning is the crisis, where the
Now.
old governmental force now, and
Yeah.
actually according to their calendaring, 25 to 29 is the end of the
Mm.
chaos, and we
Mm.
already will have a new regime in the 2030s that will solve certain things, right? And you
Yeah.
can see more or less what it is that most of the people, and again, I'm not saying I agree with it or not, but most of the people today in the West are anti-migration. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Like it's 70%.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so that's going to happen. Whether you like it or not, that's going to happen. It's going to happen in many bad ways, but it's going to happen, right? So that's just so if you can read the zeitgeist, you can see that these are really profound.
Deep stuff.
I would say in 5 years in Europe, we'll have populist governments all over the place.
Le Pen is going to win, right? Like Le Pen in France is going to win.
Be something different, and and we'll see how that goes. It'll be good and bad, in any regime, but it's going to be different from what we've seen.
It's going to be different. The one thing you can bet on is it's going to be different. I want to talk about 1968 because it's such an interesting time. I've gone over it over and over and over again. The optimism of 1962, 1963 coming from the United States was just like, finally, we have an enlightened government, right? And then the guy gets shot. The guy gets shot, and like that totally breaks everything in the same way 9/11 broke everything. Spiritual awakening. You said spiritual awakening. I'm so curious as to what happened in 1968 in France as it compares to what happened.
I lived it very intensely. I was one of these. Of course, I was late, but I was premature. I have to tell you. At 10 years old, I was reading newspapers, watching television, and I was even rooting for the Viet Cong. I was just like at a very young age, I was in this kind of spirit. And but I also have to, this is my experience, right? Is that by the 80s, the political side had completely collapsed already. So all our big dreams, socialism, this, that,
Why did it collapse? Was it 1971? Was it the economic crisis? Is that why?
Yeah. I think 71, 73, economic crisis. So you have to imagine, until that time, everybody felt confident. So you could be an activist, you could make all the mistakes you want, but you're going to have a job at the end anyways, right? That starts changing right there already, right?
Yeah.
Then you have the Reagan Thatcher counter-revolution, which is pretty harsh. It's about less welfare, shorter unemployment. So think about rock music. Where does that come from? It comes from tens of thousands of young people in England on the dole, getting money to survive and making music. That's why you had rock and roll, right? It's the fruit of that abundance of the welfare system that allowed this huge cultural experimentation to take place. But so here's the thing. So, and a lot of people had like me. So, okay, it's not working. I lived in 3 communes. They all collapsed because nobody wanted to do the dishes, of course, and the politics, like I was in a movement. They were always saying, it's gonna happen. The revolution is there, but it wasn't. It never came. And what came was just the opposite. Like a counter-revolution with Reagan and Thatcher, right? And so I thought, if I'm not happy here, and I cannot change the world, I only see one solution, which is to change myself. I have to work on myself, and so that explains the shift in the 70s. To the me generation, right? We were all 25% of the population of San Francisco went into test seminars, which was this brutal,
interesting. I've heard about this. And it's so weird. The connection is that one of the teachers. Yeah. Can you explain? So one of my spiritual teachers, David Hawkins, he talks about this thing that you just mentioned, and I've only heard him say it once. What is it?
So the Est seminar was Werner Erhard, and he later got condemned for doing stuff with children and stuff like many. But he was a very charismatic, and basically says you're all brainwashed, and in order to deal with it, you have to go through a very harsh de-brainwashing, basically. And so you had 2 days. You couldn't go to the toilet without asking permission.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Literally, if you were like handicapped, and you would complain about it, they would say, this is your doing. You are handicapped. This is your doing. You did this, right? So they had this a very radical, like karmic ideology,
Yeah.
And so it's basically about accepting completely what the situation is. No,
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I would consider that very exaggerated and absurd. But if you come from the other place, like I did, where you explain everything by the outside, like if I'm unhappy, it's because of capitalism, it's because of education, it's because of my parents, right? And all these sources of your unhappiness are outside of yourself. There's nothing you can do about it, right? So then, even if it's not completely true on the other side, it actually can help you. And that's what it did to me. Actually, I think it had this effect of saying, fuck, I have to take my my life into my hands. And because I had been a Marxist and I could not easily change completely, I went into Freudo-Marxism, which is a combination of
Interesting.
so I went to a Reichian commune, which is basically a free love commune for 3 years. And we had these organ boxes, and this was a time, man. This was like,
I'm so fascinated by 1968
yeah,
because I grew up in San Francisco, and I had the tail end of that. What you just said, also the EST seminar feels like the landmark seminar is like a slightly
the landmark is like a softer reform.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly.
When Werner was kicked out, it became landmark, and it became this whole process.
Wait, it actually comes from landmark. Landmark is the same organization. Holy shit!
They're directly connected. Yeah.
Okay. So, but I grew up in San Francisco. Also, I got a really great insight into San Francisco itself. The first neo-tantric was Pierre Bernard or something. I think it's Pierre Bernard.
I work with what's the name? Margot Anand.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was in this neo-Reichian commune. I did tantra with Margot Anand. I did lots of stuff.
Yeah. But this is so. I grew up.
Yeah, sorry.
What's that? Yeah, so I grew up in the tail end where San Francisco from 1968, which was the center of this decentralization thing that also happened in Europe at the same time, right? The TV probably allowed for that to happen, but the tail end of it, where it's the sort of like cultural degeneration of that, where like in the 1968, like I imagine, like I don't see anything wrong with free love. I think like there's just animal expressing itself, right? Like it's not.
Tell you what's wrong with it. As an old man, I will tell you what's wrong with it, because here, so you have to think of free love as sexual neoliberalism, right? It's free competition. So what do you think happens when you have free competition? I'll tell you what happened. It's
inflation.
The women compete for the alpha males. And they start cheating on everybody else. I can tell you, you cannot have a society with that. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It's really brutal. And so I wasn't an alpha male, and you get humiliated. It's brutal, because they all want the same guy, and so I didn't know what it was called. Now I know it's called hypergamy. It's like genetic, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of problem with the left that I would now say is that they know, they don't know anything about human nature. They just assume that we all good people, and if we have the right circumstances and structures, then everybody will bloom, automatically. And it's because I can tell you the 3 communes that failed, they didn't fail because some bad people made us fail. They failed. We fucked it up. And I'm sorry I'm using so much.
Go for it. There's no problem. Yeah.
So they, it failed because like the way we weren't mature. So I'm not saying it's absolutely impossible to have cooperation. I still believe in all kinds of cooperation, but it's not easy. You need rules, you need governance, you need rewards and punishments. You need the whole governance system to take care of it. It's not something that spontaneously arises easily, because people have very different visions and personalities, and so it's the same if you live with somebody, right? Like, okay, I
Yeah.
like to sleep
Yeah.
with the window closed, and
Yeah.
my wife
Interesting. Yeah.
loves to sleep with the window open. What do you do? Well, I sleep with the window open when she's there. That's like, okay, I make a compromise. But
Yeah.
but that's because it's my wife. Do I want to make a compromise with 10 people I barely know? You see what I mean? There's
That's
nothing
the problem with the
easier.
free love part.
There's
Because
nothing easier.
there's a
So
deep
it was,
energetic
yeah.
connection with sex, right? And so that deep
So
internet, yeah, go for it.
so my lesson from this experience is, it was, in a way, it was wonderful for me because I was a very shy young man, and I really
Mm.
wasn't self-confident or anything. And so, to be able to go and experiment with so many partners for, a number of years, that makes you at ease, with the thing. So for me,
Interesting. Yeah.
it was an educational experience, but also because of the way that some things happen in that community, I decided this is not the future. This is not, you can't have a society based on these rules.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
but this is
so,
the it always goes back to the kibbutz in Israel, because the one place it did work was the kibbutz in Israel, right? For
yeah,
a while. I imagine the kibbutz in Israel
and
is now
it's still working, but they're more individualistic. So, now they have,
more
uh,
individualistic.
yeah. So in the kibbutz, they used to all sleep together in a big, so now they need their own, every family has their own
They
apartment.
develop structure.
Yeah, yeah.
But how much of that is because of the identity thing? Because Israel, does have an identity in a way that the nations,
Unfortunately,
a
the
lot of other
lesson,
nations.
yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the lesson of communes, and I read quite a bit about it. I have a book here. It's
Uh,
called Globalization of Communes, and
oh,
this is
interesting.
what, and this is what people don't know. There are a lot more communes today than there used to be.
Yes. Yeah.
Nobody talks about them, but there are plenty of communes that they've been existing for 50, 60 years. But they all
Yeah.
you need something transcendent.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
most of those that work, they're religious ones, and a
Yeah.
few are political ones, like Tamera, or they have a founder, they have a particular,
Whoa.
um, um, but,
It's either got to be strong
yeah,
ideology,
something that
or
allows you to go
identity.
beyond yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Interesting.
So, it's like a marriage. So I'm not defend marriage. I'm sorry. When you
Yeah.
get old, and the reason I defend marriage is that you have a reason to stay together when things are difficult, right?
Yeah.
So it's the other person, but you're also committed to the community in a way, and to your children, and so that makes it say, okay, I'm not just gonna follow my whim of the moment. This is a commitment, right?
Yeah.
Which is more difficult to do if you're on your own and just based on feelings of the moment, right?
Yeah.
So I would say with communes is the same. And I look a lot at communes still today. I'm very interested, and
Yeah.
one of the movements I follow is the Bruderhof movement, which is,
Bruderhof.
yeah, it's a Mennonite or Hutterite,
Whoa.
and
Interesting.
there's like 6,000 or 10,000 of them. Started with 5 families in the 1930s. They all have their own apartment, but everything they have is like collect. So they get clothes from the center. They all eat together once in the evening. They have a
Wow.
woodworking factory. They have private planes, pilots of private planes. They're doing so well. They're buying parks, lakes. Um, we need that when things get really bad. And I'm
Yeah.
studying history, right? Monasteries are very important.
Yeah.
Like whenever you
Yeah.
have a dark age,
Yeah. Yeah.
monasteries are the main institution. You got warriors, but they're not very stable, and then you have these monasteries
Mm.
that actually, order your whole society when things are going. And we're getting back there, in my view. So I'm very interested
Well,
in the idea of new monasteries. Like what would it be today? What would we do today to have solidarity, mutualize, help each other? Because as the state system declines,
yeah. Yeah.
then who has your back,
Yeah.
right? one of the lessons of my cancellation was nobody
Nobody
has
has your
my
back.
and I thought, wow, I'm giving 20 years of my life and
Yeah.
I'm in trouble. And most people just look the other way because they're afraid, right? So now all my life is based on reciprocity. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
with people I can count on.
Yeah.
We make clear agreements when we start
Yeah.
working together. And yeah, I wish I had learned that earlier, but it's an important lesson.
Well, it's one of the most interesting transitions. We have the fourth turning. We have a lot of other theories of the cyclical nature of history, and it's
Yeah,
something I continuously go back to, which is what cycles are being repeated right now, and it feels like
yeah.
a whole bunch
Well,
of cycles.
they're
Yeah,
all changing at the same time,
and
and
they're all they're all cycles. Yeah,
I believe we're in a 5,000 year change from
yeah,
civilization
okay,
itself, because
yeah,
civilization itself is based on two things:
yeah,
uh, mastery of nature. Like
uh,
if we want to stay here in the valley, we need to
yeah,
master the war.
yeah.
And the second thing was, in order to do that, we need, complex, specialized society with different classes. So it's also like a social contract, right? Those two things are at stake right now. The
Mm,
first one is very obvious, which is uh yeah, we have overused nature and we need
mm,
to find
mm,
some kind of partnership based agreement with the rest of life.
mm.
But but the social is just as important. And I think that's where libertarians and liberals don't really understand is like if the majority of people are unhappy, they'll come at you with pitchforks. You can count on it. You'll be seen as a parasite, right? And so that,
Okay, well, let's talk.
yeah,
So let's talk about that one because that one's really interesting. It's the back of my mind. There's a bunch of questions I want to ask about now that the right is on the ascendant in terms of the liberal right, kind
yeah,
of.
yeah,
Because there's libertarian right. I'm in Argentina. The libertarian right is ascendant, but I would not call Trump a libertarian. He's a '90s liberal,
yeah,
who a '90s liberal populist who is essentially is taking the deep state, and instead of removing the deep state, he has now taken it under his control and
yeah.
is now using the deep state for his own goals. So their ascendant, what were we talking about? It was it's
So
the conception of the individual and I'm recognizing just what happened in 2020 to my tribe, which also had the same similar situation of like, oh, they don't have my back at all. They're all really afraid. Uh,
mm,
uh, so recognizing that that's the case, and recognizing now that the other political party, which I agree with on a lot of things, but also recognizing that everything seems to be collapsing in terms of the state,
yeah.
and also I don't want to get, a stray bullet from
So I
this
think
new
in
political
terms of
movement. Yeah,
populism, the way I see it. So first of
yeah,
all, I see that the whole world is like a dualism. So you have
yeah.
Eastern Eurasian polarity, which is
Interesting. Yeah,
state-centric,
yeah,
and
yeah,
China. The
yeah.
state controls the market, and this is nothing new.
Yeah.
That's how China actually started like 5,000 years ago. The state
Mm,
was faster than the private classes, and they completely dominated the army and the merchants, and
mm,
has been that way in different forms. And in the West, it's different because the Greeks is the private
mm,
class that took power in Greece, and that created a revolution called democracy, the polis,
mm,
right?
mm,
So in the
mm,
West, we always had this kind of conflict-based, class division, need for compromise, and that brings sometimes democracy with it. And so you have basically, I think the WEF, the World Economic Forum, has a vision for multi-stakeholder
interesting.
global management, with global finance, big NGOs, and weak nation states.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah,
perfectly
yeah.
happy, and they have 400 domain-specific commissions within the web. And then on the other side, they want to recreate basically United Nations, but without the hegemony of the West. They want, equal states, and only the states decide. That's what China wants, that's what Russia wants, that's what most of the BRICS want, right? So
Oh,
they're not against the market, but they want the state to
the
be in
state
charge.
intervene. Yeah,
Yeah. And
which is what Trump is doing.
uh, yeah, and then that's the weird thing. So within the West,
Yeah,
you have the culture war, right? And you have to know that whenever a system breaks down, you have fragmentation and polarization. This is the pagans against the Christians, the Reformation against against the Catholics, the Taoists against the Confucianists, and for us, it's the cultural war, right? And there are two classes. You have the physical class, which is both what's left of the working class and the small business people that are, engaged in real physical business. And then, unfortunately, we have this huge surplus now of symbolic works. I'm included in that. We work with our not with our hands, but with our head. We're detached from the physical world, and a lot of us have become woke, right? And that's kind of like and so you should look at Trump as an elite replacement attempt, right? So we have old elite, right? And there's a new elite coming. And they make an alliance with, workers and the farmers against the educated people in the city, and they're winning. But I think you should also look at the difference between the Anglo-Saxon populist and the continental populist. They're very different.
Very interesting.
I'll try to explain why. So the Anglo-Saxon populists are very much dominated by market libertarianism, right?
Property rights. Yeah.
And what's the problem with that is that as soon as they're in power, they de-tax the rich and they start losing their popular support. That's what happened with Trump 1.
Yeah.
But the Hungarians and the Polish, they come from the Christian democratic tradition. So they adhere to the social doctrine of the Catholic Church. And so they are very attentive to social balance. So for example, if you have 3 kids in Hungary or Poland, I can't remember which country, you get 700 zlotys, right? And so the working class is happy in these countries. That's why they've been re-elected like 5 times.
But they're never happy in the Anglo tradition because the property rights create this.
Yeah. And that depends how much kind of material misery that is created at the same time. So
what do you think about Argentina?
Well, I think Argentina is an extreme case of that, and we'll see.
Because they don't have the Anglo thing here. It's really interesting because Argentina is like a parallel universe to the northern colonies of the United States, which industrialized very early. But they don't have the Anglo thing. The British they tried to invade, they tried to take it over. Then they realized they couldn't do it, and so then they're like, okay, we'll stop.
Ideologically, they're close. They're more libertarian. The Chileans who took over in 1973. The Chicago boys. And so I just want to make a point here because I think we should try for third option, which is what my work is about, right? Nice. So I think we have the planetary Leviathan. That's the Western plan. We have the continental blocks. Civilization states. That's the China-Russian plan. Notice that they're all going back to their traditions, right? Orthodox Church in Russia, Hindutva in India, and Confucius in China, right? Yeah. This is very conscious, and this is very consciously anti-woke. Dugin, and what's his name, Wang Huyin.
Oh, I want to know the Chinese guy.
I have to check his name. I'm sorry, I forgot the exact name. He's in the Politburo. So these are people who said, he said to Xi Jinping in 2013, if we don't take measures, we'll have the same problems as the West, and we don't want to be there, right? Same thing happened in Russia. And so this is also happening in India and everything. And I think the West, under the woke regime, is a self-destructive regime because they don't want to have children. If you have such a dark vision of the future that you don't want to have children, and you don't have any positive view of because the only thing they want is redistribute what there is, right? That's not going to work.
The Shakers in the Puritan tradition of the Anglo, we had the Shakers, and the Shakers didn't have children because they wanted to retain that sexual energy that was being.
It didn't last. And that's why the populists are winning. It's not very difficult to understand.
But I think the crazy thing is
the third vision is the archipelago or regenerative villages, right?
Yeah.
So With the
Ooh.
translocal technology, we can institute
Yeah.
something that I call cosmolocalism, right?
Yeah.
Everything that's heavy is local.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything that's light is global and shared.
Ooh.
And
Ooh, I like it. Yeah.
right, and a lot of people are doing this. So millions of people are leaving the cities in the West. Like San Francisco lost 300,000 people, New York lost to 300,000 people. I think in the US there are like, is it 8 million or even or a lot
Wow.
more than that? I can't remember. But they're like they disappeared. Like nobody knows
Yeah.
where they are, right? And you know where they are? They're in Mount Shasta, they're in Oregon,
Yeah.
they're in
Yeah.
they're
I
in
met a lot of them.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are people either individually or collectively leaving the
Wow.
system because they see it doesn't work and
Yeah.
trying to instantiate new thing. And the good
Yeah.
news for me is that we now have technology to
Yeah.
organize this at scale, to coordinate all
Yeah.
this at scale. And that's what I'm working on with people in Web3, Crypto Commons Alliance and Token Engineering Commons and Ethereum Localism. So these are all
Oh.
groups that are
Yeah.
trying to put the coordination capacity of Web3 to the service of regeneration, right? So by
So
regionalism merging with cosmolocalism, that's my dream. Those,
I like it. And
yeah.
but then what about the hard power? What about the hard power when it comes knocking on the door? Because it
Well,
always does, right?
so
Yeah.
first of all, you need alliances, right? So the
Yeah.
bioregionalism is the horizontal solidarity, and cosmolocalism is the vertical solidarity. So all the people doing different things in the same region coordinate each other, help each other. All the people doing the same thing in the whole world learn from each other,
Yeah.
and create like
Yeah.
global guilds for cooperation. So that's already
Cool.
good. But the second thing is alliances, right? Jurisdictional alliances. You can only succeed if you have support from the bottom, the middle, and the top. And I want to give you an example from the end of the Roman era, right? So the Germanic forces come in, and so now you have these, Ostrogoth kings, like Theodoric, what his name was, Theodorus.
Yeah.
The king, the Italian king was a Goth. And the Romans can no longer bear arms. It's called the Salic law, right? So now you're kind of secondary citizen in your own country, but what you do is the barbarians can't manage the country, so you become the administrative class with the church, right? The church becomes what is left of the state, and who is producing the monks, right?
Yeah.
So that's why Clovis, Clovis was the king of the Merovingians, the first king in of the Franks, right? And this thing we learn in school, I just tell you that anecdote. So the Germans are warrior democrats, right? They have these particular ways of, like, once you have good,
Interesting.
the chief gets 25, the officers get 25, the soldiers get 25, and the orphans and the widows get 25. It's the same as the pirates. They have these rules, right? So the king doesn't get everything. And the king Clovis says, no, this vase is mine. And symbolically that means that he's breaking with his own people and basically, instituting feudalism and allying with the Roman elite, right? And so that's how basically how Christianity emerges victorious, through an alliance, right? You have the congregations, and and they saved Italy from hunger. The Saint Benedict, 5th century, he was a prefect. He leaves the country, to live alone. They call him back and say, "You got to help us with food, because the food came from Egypt. Now you only have olive oil and wine from slaves, and you can't maintain the discipline amongst the slaves anymore. So what do you do? Well, he creates the first monastery, and in 50 years, they solved the food problem of Italy, right? Very efficient, very organized. And you know what? All the surplus goes into the system, right? So you don't have a private class for a few hundred years, right? And they need protection, so they need the feudals, the warriors, and the warriors need order in their own country. And also, you can't start raping your own population. So the church is there to pacify, the warrior class to say, okay, you can rape outside, but in here, you can't do it, right? So
That's
that
what I
creates an
saw.
in society. And so at some point, and it's hard to say exactly how it's going to
Yeah.
happen, but if we
Yeah.
continue to build these healthy, productive communities, where we don't destroy the soil and we make the soil better, over time, we're going to have alliances and we have to work for that. And I don't know if these alliances will be left wing or right wing or whatever. I don't know. I think it's going to be very pragmatic at some point, that who
Well,
supports
because
this?
the political sort of movements of the past, they recognize that things are descending in terms of the abundance of state power. So
Yeah.
they're all fighting over what was in the past.
Exactly. There's diminishing spoils, and people are fighting harder and harder for diminishing spoils, but the future is not there. Because the Western hegemony, right, is okay. So the whole world is producing matter, sending it to the US, and the US just prints dollar. And already now, more than half of the BRICS countries are trading outside of the dollar.
Oof.
So according to Balaji's, this is going to take 4 or 5 years, and it's going to collapse. And then what's happening in Argentina is going to happen in the US and in Europe, right? And
that's
then,
like a that.
then
But
you
that's
have to be
what
ready.
you just.
You have to be ready with alternatives, right?
Yeah. What you just said, though, is basically specifically a division between, because right now both people, even in Argentina, are equating Trump with Milei, but Milei is something different. Javier Milei is a libertarian, like in the Western tradition, a populist, but also different than what Trump is, because Trump is older, a part of the boomer generation, and is representative of what you've been talking about, of essentially this this old way of doing things, and there's going to be a reaction against Trump. I don't think there already is a reaction against Trump in terms of Palantir, in terms of all these different things, like, and I don't think that's going to go in the way of Peter Thiel. Like, I don't think Peter Thiel is going to, and JD Vance and the tech people, all of whom I come from.
You see, that's the problem that I see, is that you need the people on your side, right? And you need a number of the people on your side.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to deliver. You have to deliver something.
And he's not delivering. He's delivering a little bit. There's a few things that he's delivering on, but
so it's a bit early to say. However, you have to say that the Democrats are imploding, even if he's doing all these things that they don't like. And I think that's because they have the wrong agenda. So there haven't been any crimes in Washington, D.C. for 20 days or something right now, right?
He's delivering on that. Interesting. Yeah.
If you make noise about that, like, most people are going to say, no, I'm happy that there's no crime, right? So they're as long as this little minority of people who are completely detached from, like, basically reality, as long as they control the agenda of the Democratic Party, they have no future. They're just going to continue to fall down. So one option is Mamdani in New York. He's like a populist left.
Yep.
But he's walking on eggshells. So for the moment, he doesn't talk about identity politics at all. He's focusing on affordability and stuff. But if you look a little bit behind it, what you see is he wants to spend $70 million on trans surgery. He wants to make New York the center of trans surgery in the whole US. Like, as soon as that is known, because who votes for him? Conservative Muslims. The people who vote for Mamdani are the working class migrants. So, they're on the left socially, but they're conservative culturally, right? So if he does that, he's going to expose himself on. But if he succeeds by not doing those things, he could have the same effect that Trump had with the Tea Party 10 years ago, right? And then we would have, like,
but it's local. It's not. It can't be national. It can't be national. It can only happen in an urban environment.
If you win, a lot of businesses could follow suit, right? Yeah. So I'm not a prophet. I don't know exactly how things are happening. I'm looking, but I'm still looking at social forces. That's.
Yeah. Oh man. All right, we're gonna have to do another one because I gotta. We're running out of time. But okay, well, last 5 minutes or so. So let's talk. Like, I love the Ethereum localism because I've been. I guess I'll be explicit about it. I would say that I'm more on the conservative side, but conservative localism, I align more with what Milei is talking about than I do with what Trump is talking about. And so I'm now realizing that I need to start making alliances with people on the left who I would have normally considered as the enemy because of what happened in 2020. That's all going away. I don't care about any of that anymore. The Ethereum localism, go for it.
I think what matters is to make unity around projects, Like it doesn't really matter whether you're left or right. Do you want a more healthy soil? Are we going to do like a agriculture that doesn't poison people? And I think you can find people from the left and the right. So under the bioregional umbrella, we can be post-political, right? And then we just talk pragmatically with the powers that be, right? And it's better not to ally with political parties. They change, but you can ally with the people in the administration who are long-term. And, I did a study in Ghent with the urban commons in Ghent. And that's what they told me. Like, we work with 50% of the administration is sympathetic to us. And we know who they are. And that's the people we talk to. Right? And it's dangerous to ally yourself with the left or the right, because if they get changed, you lose everything. So it's better to be healthy, like as a project yourself. Where's the money coming from? Are we making money? Can we pay people? Do we make good food? Do we, all of that stuff, right? And the politics is like downstream from that. Just like pragmatic agreements. And the people in the community, they love each other because they're working. And this is what I discovered with Web3. I'll just tell you that very briefly. So I went for the first time to Zuzalu, Montenegro. And I was sitting on a table with a collapsist, deep adaptationist, an impact professor, climate denialist. So three completely different people. You know what? They were talking in a friendly way because they're all working on their common infrastructure, right? And that's the force of Web3, but also of communities of place, who are doing something for their region, for their family, for their children. And I think we win if we can combine both. So the local capacity, but also the global capacity to get coordination and capital, into your region. And so I'm thinking of all kinds of new arrangements that we can have, like, digital sovereignty, with like a number of place-based, and then together look at commons compatible investment. Anyway, so that's the kind of stuff I'm thinking about and talking to people about.
Right. And where can our listeners find out more?
All right. So I have a Substack, Fourth Civilization Substack.com. Maybe you can put it later under the description. And then I have a very, very elaborate wiki with 40,000 articles, wiki.p2pfoundation.net. So whether you look at transportation or housing or changing the state, changing the market, everything that's P2P in the commons and how it changes what used to exist, I have it. 20 years of observation, cataloged and verified. And so I have lots of stuff that has disappeared from the web, but I have it on my wiki because I copied it.
Yes, nice. We all need to start doing a lot more of that, which is like, because all the other structures, everybody talked about the internet being a place, great, because it's all going to survive. It's not going to survive. It all needs to be cataloged. You've done a lot of it already.
You can't trust it. Everything is disappearing. Google, I don't know if you looked recently, like the way they give you the search results. They used to give everything. Now they just repeat the top searches endlessly. So all the marginal stuff is gone. It's like mainstreaming, It's like, it's very bad. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Stewart.